credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood.
Zach, what's up, brother? I appreciate you. I'm glad we were able to make this work.
Dude, I know it's been a few weeks coming now. It was super cool to connect. Obviously, I think I'm a big believer in everything happening for a reason, and you got caught in the fray of some of my cold outbound like DMs on Instagram. Super cool to like connect, and like I said, I don't think it was an accident that I can't even remember like what account that I found you on. It was like some sort of shared interest. It might have been like Solbra or something, but it was super cool to make that connection, then hop on that call and just see somebody else doing something like very similar to myself. And like we were just talking about before we started recording, like it's awesome to see and finally hear, like start to connect with the people that are doing parallel path things, you know, like we're similar age. Like I just graduated, you're in your senior year, and deciding to really try to like carve a path for ourselves, like the non-traditional way. And so it's awesome to have that kind of dialogue, and just pick each other's brain about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's so rare. Like, obviously, what we're doing is uncommon because we're trying to become uncommon people. Our pursuits, intellectually and physically, we're really trying to grow to a level where we're different than most people. And like, obviously, that's a beautiful thing. But because of that, there's not too many people out there trying to do the same thing. So like finding connections with people like you, like it's really cool. Like when I really like started trying to get into like this self-development space, I guess you would say, from a consumption point, uh it's hard due to like find people that you're aligned with, and it's I'm glad we are able to make the connection happen.
100%. I think it's an interesting conundrum about self-development because everyone, like the first thing that has to happen is the internal realization, like I want to change me, and then you have to take a step back from kind of just everyone, isolate yourself a little bit and see, like, do some reflection and say like, all right, what do I want to change, mind, body, spirit, whatever it is, and then how can I go about enacting that change piece by piece. Okay, consistently going to the gym, cleaning up my diet, cleaning up the information I consume, start following more people, podcasts, books, all that stuff. And that very much is like that isolated pursuit. But at some point, once you get your head above water, you kind of orient yourself and you figure out, okay, this is kind of the game plan. I need to continue to move in this direction. You are naturally, one, isolated because you step back, but two, like once you start getting some of those results of the change, people around you that aren't doing the same thing start to press back. And it's like, that's the really heartbreaking part of it all, is that they're, even if they're like close friends or people that care about you, that change that they see in you, it pokes at a little bit of the insecurity, like maybe I'm not doing enough in my own life. And they'll go back, be like, what do you mean you're doing affirmation statements? Or like, what do you mean you can't come out tonight? Like, what? Like, come on, bro, it's just one night. Like, you're gonna stretch? Like, what are you eating? Like, do you think you're better than us? Like, all that kind of stuff, like those little pokes and prods. It's really hard. And then now you're on an island, and so starting to find like those individual characters you can start to bring into your life that are interested in doing the same or at least similar, but generally under the umbrella of like sucking the marrow out of life. Like, let's figure this thing out. Why are we here? And if not to maximize our potential. So yeah, like you said, meeting other like-minded people, it's like finding people with the spark, you know, like the player characters, the non-NPCs, the ones that like
The non-NPCs, the ones that are not are trying to get out of the matrix, I guess you would say.
Exactly, yeah.
So dude, what was the impotence? What was like the what got you into this to what was your what made you make the switch from being someone average to trying to be someone uncommon?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I also love the way you can like come back to uncommon. I have like my daily kind of affirmation thing. It's like a saved note that I have like dictate to me every single day, and the first line is Zach is an uncommon man. But I guess side note there, but go back to where it all started, I think I grew up playing sports, super competitive kid. But even back to like middle school and high school, I always was playing sports and I was decent at it. I had the hand-eye, the mental game, but I just never looked like an athlete. I was kind of a chubbier kid, and that was always tremendously. It was a huge thing I was insecure about. Like changing in the locker room with other guys, like taking my shirt off. Like I never had abs as a kid, all that stuff. So that was like the first foray into self-development. Is like, okay, how do I change my body? How do I train to be a better athlete just generally? Because I don't think I wasn't born blessed. I didn't have a 40-inch vertical. I wasn't like jumping out the gym. So I had to use my work ethic and brain to like catch up to some of the more gifted athletes too. So that was the first entry. But I think like once you start having that agentic view of the world and like learning about fitness, and then fitness comes like training, and then training goes into nutrition and then all that stuff, those same types of people that are talking about that, they're also talking about mindset, philosophy, all the like broad world of self-development. So that was like kind of the entry point early high school. I was always like a big reader when I was young, and then big break from that for a long time because of like the AP AR reading system like really took away my love for it. But regardless, I think diving back into my love of that stuff, I was raised by my dad, was a history philosophy double major, so I had like always an appreciation for history and like studying the great men of history, a fascination with like ancient Greek history, all that kind of stuff. And so it all started to piece together then, but it was very like disparate. It was kind of like a off and on pursuit. What didn't get very consistent, even with training, until I got to college and I walked on to the Georgia Tech lacrosse team, and it was like, okay, like everybody's bigger, faster, stronger. If you want to see the field, and like I rode Pine for like 2.5 years, trying really hard. You have to improve yourself physically. So it's like, okay, let's take this training thing seriously. Like sleep, recovery, stretch every night. Like I was in my freshman dorm room, like stretching on the carpet. My freshman roommate was actually on the track team, like the varsity track team, and he was looking at me like I was weird, like who is this like club lacrosse player like doing like foam rolling and stuff. But I'm always been like a very disciplined person, and so I was like, these are the variables I can control. I can't control the fact that I wasn't born 6'9" and like with a 40-inch vert, but I can control like my recovery. Am I waking up on time? Am I eating what I can control? um, and then I think fast forward to like getting ready to graduate university this past year, I was looking at kind of the future and knew I always wanted to be an entrepreneur, take like some sort of an uncommon path. And I had studied throughout college biomedical engineering, kind of blending that like background with technical skills and interest. Like I love to work with my hands, all that stuff, but also the human body, just being fascinated by it. Like the more you learn, the more you want to learn. And so that was kind of like my, I guess, studies. But I recognizing like long term, I want to be able to work for myself, and I want to find what I'm really passionate about. And so an exercise I did fall of my senior year was ikigai. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the term, but it's a Japanese concept which is translated to reason for being. And for those that haven't seen the diagram or aren't familiar with the concept, Google it, Ikigai. There's like a 4-circle diagram, and you ask yourself kind of 4 questions, and you move directionally closer to the center. The center is your ikigai, your reason for being, your basically your purpose. And the outer questions are, what are you good at? Like, what are your skills and competencies? What do you love to do? What does the world need? And then what can you be paid for? And where all of those things intersect is your purpose. And so it was just an exercise, like one of the reflection exercises. I wrote it down in this notebook right here. I still have it, little 2022. And just try to fill in those answers to those questions. And I don't think like it wasn't just like a light bulb, holy crap, like I'm going to do this for the rest of my life. But I think that subconscious work led me to the place where like when I'm graduating, I took a pretty big investment into like building out a course, and have been working on that since graduating, kind of alongside my full-time job. And I think it really answered a lot of questions for me. I've what do I love to do? I love self-development. I've been working on myself. I would do it if nobody paid me, and I already was doing it. So that's like, what do I love? And then what does the world need? Well, I think the world right now clearly needs a lot of stronger men. like people who are like on the path, like you said, like people who are trying to be uncommon, but really like get to be the best version of themselves, like take control over all the variables they have over themselves. And then what can you get paid for? Well, like the model of high ticket courses online, like is a business model. I don't try to look at it as much as a business model, but it is a way to make money and certainly potentially a way to sustain myself. And then like, what am I good at? Well, I have a ton of background in like this training. I think I'm a pretty deep thinking person. All these notes, like skills, competencies. I'm a good communicator. I've had leadership roles in like everything I've had in my entire life. I even look back to like just being the oldest of three brothers is like a natural leadership position. And so all of that amalgamates to kind of what I'm trying to work on right now with both my podcast, which is kind of more of the exploratory, like just information gathering, like how can I have conversations with smart people and learn more about life, and then the program itself, which is how can I impart the lessons that have changed my life onto other people who are interested in doing the same.
It's awesome, man. And I think one of the more underrated things about doing a pursuit like that, where you're putting all these things together into like a course, is how much you learn from creating that.
Dude, I couldn't agree more. I mean, the forced reflection aspect of just like, okay, you need to put it into some sort of communicable format so that other people can digest it and like systematically kind of move closer to through the coursework that you're putting together. It's really cool because it's like, okay, I need to distill everything down into like, for me, it's a 12-week course. So what are like, bar none, if you had to just strip it down, like what are the most important things to learn? What are the most important resources I wish I had at the beginning, like somebody just handing it to me basically? And then what are the best books to read? What are all these things? And then going back to some of the old books that I read a long time ago and re-indoctrinating myself and refreshing myself on that information has been like a super enriching thing for myself. So I completely agree.
Yeah, it's a cool pursuit. It's something that I would like to eventually try to do, even if it's not for other people, just more for myself, really, to kind of create, like, I like to call it like the art of living, of like, if I were to teach, what would I put together if I was a teacher and had free reins? I think it's a cool thing that people should explore for sure.
Do you see yourself ever writing a book?
I would love to. Yeah. I've always been inclined to write. So that's something that I think I would definitely like to pursue. What about yourself?
100%. I think, I don't know. It's funny. It was like an ex girlfriend of mine, my senior year. Obviously, my girlfriend at the time, but we were like sitting in my room. We were just talking, and like I have a pretty like probably verbose vocabulary. It's kind of obnoxious. It's just a product, I think, of reading all the time. But I talk different than I think a lot of people, especially like just guys our age. You know, I was like in a fraternity, but I don't think I sound like much of a frat guy. I, it depends on the time of day you catch me, I suppose. But regardless, she was like, she's like, you could definitely write a book, and like that was the first time somebody else had told me that, and I've always had in the back of my mind, like, you know, I love reading books. I'm learning a lot. I will have learned a lot by the time I'm old and like have wisdom and stuff. Um, but yeah, I think writing a book is really cool, and Alex Hermosi has a cool perspective on it too, where you know, he's very anti-legacy. He's like, look, like one generation after you're dead, like people just won't even remember who you are. So like the only way that you consistently through humanity can pass down any sort of legacy is through writing, right? Like we're still reading Marcus Aurelius's Meditations thousands of years later. Otherwise, we just wouldn't know what he said, what he thought, what any of that stuff, you know? And even like the concept of legacy through the people you can have an impact on, like that's something I take pretty seriously. Both the people you interact with, like somewhat cursory, but also like the children I will eventually raise, the partner I eventually will have. That's a bit of your legacy, but even then that dies with them, right? And the lessons they're able to pass on. But I think writing is something very special for mankind. So yes, I plan on it, and writing a book is such a large endeavor that an idea I had and I'm starting to work on now is like a minimum viable product book basically. I like the concept. Like Alex Hermosi wrote $100 million offers, and he put it out for 99 cents on Amazon. And so either writing a book for free or for like 99 cents, that's just like as little as I can just to say that I've written a book and get over that mental block, and then eventually write like more of a magnum opus, like a proper like long book. But an idea that I'm working on right now is like just a short book that's 1,000 things to do instead of worry. Because I think the more I talk to people, especially guys in my course, but even people in my life, it seems like anxiety is just this pervasive issue for a lot of people, and no one's insulated from it. Like I get anxious as well, um, but it's all entirely within your control. And so, just kind of one of those books that you could, if you're feeling yourself get anxious, you just open it up 1 through 1,000, like touch it on the page. Okay, go for a walk. Okay, do whatever. And that way, it's like I don't have to write this like complicated book, but I can say that I've written and published a book, get past the mental barrier, and then be like, oh, like it's very much like an identification thing. Now I am an author, not someone who like wants to be.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, something I'm thinking about doing.
Absolutely, that's a cool idea. I like the concept of like, you familiar with Tim Ferriss's like Tools of the Titans?
Yes,
Or
I got it right over here.
yeah, I love that concept of like almost having other people write the book for you. You know,
Yeah,
like interviewing a ton of people and then putting it all together. I think that's such a cool concept for so many different fields. Like I could see it in like the medical industry, like how cool it would be to like ask 100 cancer experts like what they would do if they got cancer, or like autoimmune disease. I feel like there's so many different avenues you can go with a book like that. It would be cool to, I don't know, to put that together in your version of that, whatever that may be.
I think I completely agree. I mean, I think you're already starting to build that bank of information. Like the book is being written whether you're writing it or not. You know, like every one of these recordings is permanently logged in the digital ether, and so until the EMFs like wipe everybody out and the grid goes down, like you have all this information that you'll be able to return to and be like, whether you want to start next month or in 5 years, your book is being written. And I think that's super cool. And now with technology, like even like the software we use, like it's literally transcribing the conversation. So a ton of the work's being done. And I don't know, I think it's so cool. And had you not started your podcast, every single conversation you've had wouldn't be out there. And that's been a cool product or like thing for me to return to mentally about all of this is like, I'm very hard on myself. Like I want to make more progress than I'm making. I'm very like goal oriented, but reflectively, it's like, where were you 6 months ago before you started this? Like think about all the cool people you've met, the opportunities you've had, the impact you've had on people's lives. That's huge. And you just started. And so you're in the same boat where like, whether it's 10, 50, 100, 1,000, or 100,000 people that watch one of your episodes, those people are spending like an hour with you and your guest learning. That's amazing. Like you're putting information out there and people are getting lessons from it. So the scale, it'll naturally get there. Like we've talked about it before. Like people think on shorter timelines, like overestimate 6 months, underestimate 5 years. I mean, like I'm excited to see where you and I are in 5 years. It's impossible to know, but like if we tweet, post, record every single day for 5 years, like we can't fail. Like we just can't.
Yeah, it's just being consistent. I mean, it's very rare, I think, that when someone really puts themselves into an environment like this and goes all in, that they fail, especially if they just stay consistent for a long enough time. So yeah, dude, I'm excited for what will come. And the podcast, like how cool is it that like, when was the last time outside of a podcast that you spent 2 hours with somebody, no phones, just talking? And to do that every week it's truly is a something in the modern world that we don't get enough, and it really is a cool treat about hosting a podcast.
I completely agree. I think I tell my guests like, because like I was and honestly, quite frankly, am still a podcast novice, right? Like I'm not a pro. I've taught myself all the editing. I've taught myself how to record, like bought the mics on Amazon. Like it's very much like a guerrilla warfare kind of thing for me. And so when I sit down with my guests, like I'll give them a warning. I'm like, hey, like there's a chance like that we have a technical difficulty. It doesn't record. This doesn't get like uploaded, whatever. But if the worst thing that came of it is we sat down and had a quality conversation for 2 hours, like I look at that as a win. I even say that to like my clients on like calls when I'm trying to get them to join the program and like just telling them about what I'm working on. I'm like, look, if it's not a right fit, it's not a right fit. It's no skin off my back, no skin off yours. But we sat and shared each other's story for 30, 45 an hour. That's a meaningful interaction that, like you said, isn't common nowadays. And like people aren't sharing that stuff. And I think men specifically have a hard time having that kind of emotional outlet where there's that vulnerability because so much pressure is like just perform, um, deliver, and it's both like the pressure we put on ourselves, but also the pressure the world puts on us. And we haven't like a lot of people just don't have people to talk to about that. Whether it's like missing father figures, no siblings, no like fraternal environment, like not a fraternity, but like just a group of brothers basically that you can share that stuff with. And so I've been that's one thing that's been really kind of interesting to me about building out my program is like the amount of vulnerability you get from strangers, just even in like over Instagram DMs. Because to me, it's like, why would you ever respond to someone cold reaching out, right? Like, why did you respond to me? Because to some degree, like you're craving these kind of interactions, and likewise, like I'm also looking for people like you. I don't like the universe led us together to like be able to connect and then like have this longer form conversation. But even if it was just over messages, like me prompting a general, like a very general question, whatever I asked, like how long have you been following so and so, like what are you up to, and then you to respond. The fact that you're responding is like there's a need there, right? Like you felt the isolation of self development to some degree, and like I know you have some of the like guys and community around you that you need, but I think we all need and desire more.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then you also like when you DM me, I have done that so much as of recent with the podcast that like I knew what it like was like to be in your shoes. So it's just it's fun to be able to connect with like-minded people for sure.
Yeah, so I want to hear a little bit about like I'll flip it back on you. I want to hear a little bit about your path. I know loosely kind of the story, especially like with the autoimmune thing, and then your injury as well. I want like what was your self development path like? Were you like long term always kind of into it, and then when did it really kind of the flip, the switch flip for you?
Yeah, so when I was like 16, I got diagnosed with a autoimmune little skin condition. Um, and the doctors said there's nothing really you can do and it's just going to get worse over time. And obviously at the time that freaked me out. And I didn't do anything about it because I didn't think there was anything to really do. So then over, I would say, the next 3 years, I was just very average high school kid, drank, smoked, uh, was just pretty mediocre, played baseball, uh, and then decided I was going to go to a community college in California, Santa Barbara City College, um, just because I felt like I had more to give. Um, I didn't want to play like D3 baseball or anything like that because I thought that I could do more. But then I got out there and I went out one night, was hammered, super drunk. I'm not a huge drinker to begin with, but this night I was super drunk and it was literally like a month into college. And I'm leaving a party. There was like, it was in a backyard, and on one side the gate was locked and on the other side the gate was open and people were going in and out. And I went to the wrong side. So I was with my friends and we're like, all right, let's just climb the fence. um, and me being pretty intoxicated at the time, climb the fence, go to jump off the fence. I jump, land one foot on concrete, one foot on grass, and just like slipped my footing, stuck my arm out to catch myself, and tore every single ligament in my arm, broke my arm, dislocated my arm. Like you could tell off the bat how fucked up it was. So then that really ended my baseball career. And from there, I got so much like purpose out of baseball. And like I've always liked to work hard. And I always channeled that into sports. So being able to have something that I was excited to work hard for outside of sports was something that I was really craving. So I kind of just dove into guys like Tim Ferriss and Rogan and Aubrey Marcus and pushed myself to start learning. And it was so different from the person that I was beforehand. I couldn't remember the last time I picked up a book. But then there was one day I was in the airport, picked up a copy of Ryan Holiday's Stillness is the Key. Um, and I just was infatuated with the book. It was it opened myself up to this world of reading and of learning and self-development. So then from there, I really dove in fully. And then with the autoimmune disease, I was just trying to learn, especially with the knowledge of stoicism. I realized that, I can't control what happens, but there's something here that I can control, and I need to figure out what that is. I know there's some things that are in my control. So I researched, I learned, I knew that would be in my control to just consume and to become an expert on myself, and on this disease. And then, you hear about so many people going carnivore or animal based or just doing an elimination style diet and alleviating their symptoms. So I really decided during quarantine, the timing ended up being pretty beautiful. It's like one of those things that you just such a blessing. Just seems like the universe aligns, like you said before. And yeah, so right when I started really learning a ton about this stuff, I was in quarantine, which is the perfect time to do an elimination style diet. Um, Dove in fully, did this elimination diet, ate a ton of meat, fruit, vegetables. That was pretty much it. Um, and I was able to totally eliminate my symptoms. And then from there, once real life kind of kicked in, the journey becomes a lot less linear than you think. You go out and you drink and you wake up the next day with a skin reaction, and um, you kind of just play this out and learn more and more, and then you get to a point where you're in control. And that taught me just so much about really I love stoicism so much because of this. Really, it's like I learned this philosophy that was able to guide me out of this autoimmune disease, um, which I'm so grateful for. And like, I'm so grateful for the autoimmune disease because like the person I am because of it is so much better than the person I would have been without it. Um, so I think it's like we have this duality nature of things that we don't realize. There's good in the bad and there's bad in the good, and we don't realize enough how certain things at the time seem so awful when in reality that's not the whole case, and that there's more there to discover and to learn.
That's super beautiful. And I think, yeah, I mean, it's really cool. And I'm also equally passionate about stoicism because, we talked about anxiety before. It's the antidote, right? Like, what is anxiety? It's your mind trapped in the future and worried about the uncertainty of what is going to come, but you can't live in the future. You can't live in the past either. That's depression, like staying in the past, like worrying about stuff that's already happened. Anxiety is like, holy shit, what's coming? I have no control, like anxious, uncomfortable, whatever. But if you just sit directly in the present, like power of now, Eckhart Tolle, all this stuff, stoicism, what can you control? You can control right now, and the only thing you can control right now is you. None of the periphery, none of the whatever. So it's like it's the perfect antidote for anxiety, and it just it puts you in the driver's seat. Like the amount of agency you have over your life and understanding that it's all you, you feel like it's a drug. You feel like fully powerful, fully in control. And then, like you said, it's non-linear, and you get to see how this like beautiful story unfolds when you start like pulling on the levers that you can control and really dialing in on that stuff. It's awesome.
Yeah, it's stoicism's one of those things that I feel like it just captivates people when they truly get it. Like a certain type of person, it just really does allow them to be such a better person, and just this idea of ownership and knowing that whatever happens, even if it seems like you're not at fault in some way, you are at fault. And one, it just makes you a better person because you're more understanding to people. Like this is a interesting example here. So I got my car stolen. Um, and obviously your first reaction is you're pissed, you're annoyed, whatever. And I was a little extra frustrated because I was at a friend's house and I was going to the airport, and I had parked my car at their house, and then he was driving me in his car. Um, and I realized I had the car keys on me. And I was like, oh, I don't want to bring these with me. And I left them with him.
Hmm.
And he left them in his car with the car unlocked. And then someone went into his car, got the keys, and then whatever. But uh, obviously, your first reaction is to be mad and to yell at him or to be real pissy at the situation. But if you just take a step back and you realize, like, I should have thought about what the better scenario is. Like, what's the issue with just me bringing my keys? Like, I should have just brought the keys with me, or I should have left them in the house, should have done something. I could have done something better. And when you really turn those situations on their head like that, it just makes you so much better, because then you're learning from the situation. You're not blaming others for the situation, which in turn is going to make you less likely to be a dick. So it's just
Better to be around.
to me it's a philosophy that has just really provided so much value for me. And I think that for most people out there, if they're curious about the stuff that we're saying, um, all of Ryan Holiday's books are great. Stillness is the key. The obstacle is the way. Courage is calling. Discipline is destiny.
Ego is
He
the
has a
enemy.
bunch of what?
Ego's the enemy.
Ego is the enemy. Yes, thank you. All of those just really dial in on all the aspects of stoicism and do it in a very digestible way. And then from there, you can go right to the source with Meditations by Marcus Aurelius, which is, I think it's my favorite book of all time. If not, it's a close second. What about you? Where does that one rank for you?
It's not an easy answer, but I mean, it's easily a perennial top 3 just
Yeah.
because of its practicality. And I mean, I also think I have a particular fascination with kind of like Western ancient history, so like Greek, Roman, all of that stuff, like the emperors, like it always captivated me, even
You and
when I
me
was
both.
little. And I think like even the Percy Jackson series, loved it, fascinated by it. Like now on my arm, like I have like Greek statues tattooed all over it. It's like gonna finish out the sleeve. Like it is a permanent part of the fabric of me, and so it's unbelievable to be able to literally hear the private thoughts of a leader of like the free world back then, or the free world, and just like understand that the problems he was facing at that time are the same problems we have both with ourselves and with others. Like he talks about, one of his things in meditations is like understand that the people you're going to interact with today are short, and like they're not going to be patient with you, they're going to be annoying, they're going to be stupid, they're going to be all these things. But know that ahead of time, and then adjust how you act because of the people you're going to interact with. And like, that's the story of our lives. And I mean, every line in there, it's just remarkable to me how practical it is. Like, to be able to hear the thoughts and feelings and like reflections of a guy from forever ago and basically have a conversation with him. It's amazing. So to that level, it is extremely like personal. So it's easily a top 3. I'd have to really spend some time to get like what my number 1 is, but I mean, that is a borderline religious text.
Absolutely. It's just so fascinating too, because like he is, I believe, the only emperor, king, someone with absolute power that didn't abuse their power too much. You know, they I think it's Socrates that had this idea of the philosopher king,
Mm.
and how the ideal ruler for a kingdom would be somebody who has absolute power but was a philosopher and was able to use that power for good. Because when you have absolute power, obviously you can make shit happen, but you have to be very careful with the person that you put in that situation. And the level of self-control and wisdom it takes to be a person like that, you see it in the text. You see his daily battles with abusing his power and with trying to control himself. It's a beautiful read.
Yeah, I think another one that comes to mind, like a character in history, that is, that I always go back to, and I'm just floored with the level of compassion. And to me, it is God given. Like, it is something that is beyond a singular man. But George Washington, you know, in all of human history, including Marcus Aurelius, the playbook is you gain your freedom, you conquer a nation, you whatever, like you become a thing, a nation state, a country, a tribe, and then some guy who is like the leader of it all, everyone turns to you and says, "You lead us, your king, your czar, your whatever, your god." And here's that. And like, to be able to be that guy for the American Revolution, have everyone turn to you and say, "Here's the keys. We want to worship you literally like a deity." And for him to have both the forethought and then the like egolessness to say, if any of this was important, if we did this for any reason at all, it has to live past me. And so I relinquish control and like deny it. It has to be passed down past me in a structured way. Otherwise, this was pointless. Um, I mean, it's just amazing, like to be able to, because I have no idea if and I would pray to God that I'm strong enough to be able to deny an opportunity like that. But like, absolute power corrupts absolutely. If somebody came to you and was like, "Here's $10 million, all you have to do is sacrifice your character," or like $10 billion, like you can have it all. You just have to do whatever. And I'm definitely a bit of a tinfoil hat person, so I'm thinking of like modern day stuff, like those powers that be, and like they come to all these people that reach these levels, and people are offered those kind of opportunities, and I think a lot of people cave. So to look back and say, like, at the beginning of at least America's story, somebody had that opportunity and just flat out denied it. That's amazing to me. So I completely agree. I think there is a groundedness in self, a groundedness in philosophy and reflection, and then a groundedness in some level of spirituality. It doesn't have to be kind of the Western, very Christianized version of God, but a understanding that you are less than what is the greater universe and powers that be.
What are some books? So I love history, but I haven't read a ton about history.
Mm.
Are there any books that you would recommend?
Oh gosh, put me on the spot. I will get back to you after this with like a full detailed list, and then you can put that in the show notes and for anyone interested. But I'll try to
Sweet.
see if there's anything like next to me off rip. So obviously, like with the Vitruvian Man program and all the stuff I'm doing, like high Renaissance is very fascinating to me. And so Walter Isaacson is like the goat of like biographies, basically.
Yeah.
And so Ben Franklin, his biography on Ben Franklin, amazing. Ben Franklin, super fascinating guy.
Super fascinating.
Just like crazy because I mean, kind of a bit of a Renaissance man in himself, you know, inventor, philosopher, historian, politician, diplomat, all that. So Ben Franklin's, and then Leonardo da Vinci, also by Walter Isaacson. Very different people, very good books, both in the same sense. And then there's a few titles for like George Washington. I'll definitely have to get back to you on that though, because I don't want to. I want to have like a more complete list, and quite frankly, I haven't even done enough reading. And then also like making sure that you're sourcing it correctly, so it's not like revisionist history, but it can be a lot closer to like what probably actually happened. I mean, unfortunately, we'll never be able to go to the past and truly know. You know, they say history is written by the victors. So some amount of it is what we're told and whatever, but I think a lot of that stuff is super cool. So I'll try to get you a more complete list. But Walter Isaacson's a great place to start, because I think what's cool about biographies as opposed to historical fiction, nonfiction, story retelling, is that you get to like live that era through a singular person. I think that's why why like Alexander Hamilton, the play or the musical, became so popular, because it's like you take this dry piece of history, a historical figure that nobody really knows much about. I mean, the guy started the central banking system, you know, just like dry portions of American history. And then you get to have it come to full color and vibrant detail when you find out like there's an affair and he lost his son and he had enemies and he was this dynamic character. And it's like, wow, every single person that you read about in a history book, whether they had one line or a chapter or a whole book, those people had loves and feelings, and like they were just as dynamic as you. And so when you get to hear it in like a storytelling perspective, it's like, wow. So I think biographies are awesome because you get that like more rounded picture, the human story behind the history, versus like Ben Franklin did this, and this, and that's the bullet points I studied for my AP history test, and I got a good grade. Like those are the facts, but you want to hear about the person in the story.
Yeah, good history teacher. That what really makes a good history teacher is a good storyteller, I feel like. And that's such a blessing to have, like somebody like that who can really dive deep. I don't know. Are you familiar with Dan Carlin? Have you listened to his podcast at all?
I've heard the name. I don't think I've listened to his podcast though. No.
So it's called Hardcore History.
Okay. Yeah.
And he's you're familiar with it?
Yes.
Yeah. Just a masterful storyteller, and talks about these events through history and in a podcast form, and it's just so cool. Like it's something that it's so fascinating because humans are humans. And like if you were in those shoes, you'd probably act very similar to them. So it's so fascinating to think about and to put yourself in those shoes.
Yeah. And I think reading too, a reason I love it so much, and I kind of alluded to it with the Marcus Aurelius thing, but like you get to build a relationship, or at minimum have a conversation with people that are dead and gone. And it was like, I think it was Seneca or Epictetus, one of those guys was basically communicating with the oracle at Delphi, and it was like, you should go and read, but that's not what the oracle said. The oracle said to the effect of have conversations with the dead. And so that's reading. You get to literally understand their mindset, sit down with them in long form as if it was a long conversation, a podcast, weeks of mentorship, all the lessons they learned, the failures, all the points. And then you get to absorb that knowledge. It's the cheat code. It is the hack. I have like even a post on my Instagram where like I talk about kind of like books and libraries. And I think there's no coincidence to me that some of the greatest monuments erected by mankind were libraries. Like think about Library of Alexandria, like all these ornate buildings, even like these massive universities. Like I spent some time studying abroad at Oxford University, these libraries that are hundreds of years old, like Trinity College in Dublin, beautiful like pieces of art, essentially entirely purpose driven to hold and store books. To me, that's the inclination, like that's the universe like winking at you and saying like this stuff is gold, this stuff is the same as the treasures that you guys are holding on to and the precious metals, like, but more valuable because you get to live 1,000 lives, 5,000 lives, absorb all the lessons from all these people, and like skip thousands of years ahead of time. If you don't go back and reflect on that, then what were those people's lives for? Like, is humanity progressing in a linear way? Are we moving positively forward? And I would hate for, in this information age that we live in, where it's so easy to like just consume passively. And we could talk about conspiracy wise, like people want you to be a little vegetative, all that stuff. But outside of that, like if you are just taking the agentic view for you yourself personally, you have a choice every single day. Do you pick up the easy, the tempting, the passive, or do you pick up a book and thumb through the pages and try to get better? But yeah, I think reading has a special place and always will have a special place in my heart.
The fact that there's all these people in history, some of the smartest, most accomplished people in history, and they sat down and wrote down all the lessons, all the things, all the experiences that they've learned through their entire life and put it in one condensed document. You'd be an idiot not to read it. And it's like there's so many of those, and there's so many examples of people who did just that and sat down and put all their lessons that they learned in their lifetime in one document. And you have that ability to pick that up and to not make the same mistakes as they did, or to make some of the better decisions that they did. And it's such a blessing to be a reader and to enter into that world, because it's an addiction to a certain degree. Like there's a lot of people out there that haven't picked up a book in ages, but if you give them the right book, you will have them. You can make them a reader for life. Uh, so it's just something that, like, I'm so grateful that I found that book Stillness is Key at the right time in my life. Like, just opened me up to this whole new world, and it's so cool.
Yeah, I think I completely agree. I don't think that moment was an accident either. You know, I think the right book found you at the right time where you were ready to become a reader for life. I think the time you took away from reading was necessary for whatever the reasons were, even if it's just so that you can look back and be like, I missed all those years. Now I can't waste it. Like I think about like my gap. Was I doing something wildly productive in the massive gap I took from like when I was young in middle school and then didn't read until like basically the end of high school? Maybe not, but definitely I can look back and be like, shit, like I don't know how long I'm going to live, but I lost close to a decade of years of books that I can read. Now I got to go double time, like just crank. But yeah, I think we have to nip this in the bud. Otherwise we'll talk about reading for the rest of this. I want to get into,
Absolutely.
I want to get into some of the training. I'm a geek about like the training, like nutrition, all that stuff. I'm curious, like, what has been your path of training? Like, I think everyone goes through these phases where it's like move the most weight, like meathead style. Then you learn about like progressive overload, like the actual technicalities of it. And then you go into diet and you go anywhere from like the shredding, like low cal, like zero sugar replacement sweetener stuff, all the way to like, okay, now I'm eating like organ meat and like know what I'm doing. So I want to hear about like your path, and then kind of what does your current training and nutrition thing look like for you?
All right. So since I played baseball, I trained for a long time of just simple athletic movements, and I wasn't doing uh, like bench press or deadlifts. When I was playing baseball, I was trying to train pretty functionally. Um, so that just looked like push-ups, pull-ups, very basic movements, dips, ab stuff, legs, whatever, basic. And then once I graduated, or once I finished playing baseball, um, I've started, I would say, the past, it's been about during quarantine when I did that diet, I was pretty strong before. When I was playing baseball, I was about like 170. And then uh, when I did that elimination style diet, I was doing a ton of fasting and eating so clean, and I wasn't training properly. And because of that, I slimmed down to, I was like 150 and just
Whoa.
so skinny.
How tall are you?
I'm like 5'7".
Okay.
Yeah, so short little guy.
I was just trying to
And
frame like weight to height ratio.
yep. So I was like 150, just super skinny for me. And what happened is uh, it's this thing called redistribution.
Yeah.
So when you, let's say I wasn't getting enough protein and calories in, and I was training my upper body a ton and never training my legs, um, because my body felt the need to grow my upper body muscles, it would eat away at a muscle that was inactive in order to grow the muscles that are being active. So it's this idea of redistribution, and I hypothesized that that this happened to me pretty bad when I was doing this elimination diet and a ton of fasting. If you want to do a ton of fasting, and it's not something that I would totally recommend for everybody. If you're overweight, I think it's an amazing tool. But use essential amino acids. Those kind of eliminate the need for your body to do redistribution. Um, but since then, I've kind of just been like, quote unquote, like rebuilding my body.
Sure.
And I would say for the last year, I've been going pretty heavy into almost like traditional bodybuilding style stuff, with an emphasis on uh, like, are you familiar with Ben Patrick, the knees
Yeah.
over toes guy?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Um, so I'll try to do for my lower body, I'll try to be a little more dynamic with the things that I do. But with upper body, pretty traditional bodybuilding style stuff. And I've seen a lot of progress in the last year. I never had taken like creatine, or never had really been dialed in with my nutrition. And um, so putting all those things together for the first time, I was able to see some pretty cool gains. And I think that what I would recommend for people is take creatine monohydrate. It is a cheat code. It's the most studied supplement that we know of, or we have the most studied supplement. There's very little known side effects. It's extremely safe, and you're gonna get pretty jacked, especially if it's your first time ever using it. It's a awesome little cheat code to increase muscle mass. And I love amino acids, especially if you want to try to stay a little lower calories. It allows you to do some fasting, and not get the negative consequences of your muscles being redistributed. So I love amino acids, creatine. Um, I've started to get into whey protein. So I was worried about whey for a while because of my skin. I didn't want, it's pretty processed, and dairy for a lot of people can cause some issues. But I was able to this summer study under this guy, Dan Garner, who is the nutritionist for a ton of professional athletes, John Rahm, Sean O'Malley, the UFC fighter.
Yep.
And he is really into precision and testing as many, getting as many data points as possible to get this full picture of your physiology, and then from there acting accordingly. And food sensitivity tests are something that is pretty fringe. It doesn't have a lot of great science behind them. A lot of them are just bullshit. But there's this one, it's an MRT. I took the 170 test, which is just 170 foods, and it will, on a scale from 0 to 5, um, you will see how inflammatory those foods are for you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, he claims it's the only one that you can really trust, because most of them on the market right now are pretty low quality. So I took that, and whey and dairy was super low inflammatory for me. So I've inquired a lot. I've added a lot of dairy into my diet, and so far it's been good. So I've been doing a lot of whey protein. For me, it's just helpful to keep calories low uh, and get high protein. Um, I would say that like all I want to do is reach 160 grams of protein. That's how much I weigh now. 160 grams of protein. I don't really care how many carbs or how much fat I eat in a day, but trying to keep that whole foods for the most part, and things that I don't have an issue with. Really, my only autoimmune triggers now uh, are like nightshade vegetables, so like peppers and things like that, tomatoes, and soy. Those are the only two foods that really cause issues for me. But more than anything else, it's sleep. Like if I get really good sleep, I'm not gonna have an autoimmune reaction no matter what I eat if I'm super good with my sleep. But the worse the sleep is, the more my immune system gets out of whack. Um, so that's why like I've started transitioning away from drinking alcohol.
Yeah.
It's something that it doesn't serve me at all. I've never really been a drinker to begin with. I never really got a lot of joy out of drinking. So it's something that I've just, I'll have one drink here and there if socially it's something to avoid me being quote unquote like different from other people, which is something that I obviously still need to work on, is being comfortable being a little different than other people, and being willing to say no to certain things. But for the most part, yeah, I drink very, very little nowadays, which has really helped me um, get my sleep right, which has had a big impact on my health. What about you? What's your training and nutrition looking like?
Yeah. I want to touch on the fasting thing. I'm just really curious. So, what is generally your fasting protocol, and what's the longest fast you've done?
So longest fast I've done is 48 hours.
Okay.
So just 2 days. And shout out my brother right now. So he's in the uh, desert of Las Vegas. I think I'm blanking on the name of where he's at, but he's doing a rite of passage wilderness retreat. So he's doing 3 days on his own in the wilderness, no food, totally fasted by himself, no books, no stimulation. So I'm a little nervous for him right now. He's doing that as we speak.
Is he older or younger?
He's older.
Okay.
He's 4 years older than me. And we kind of did this self-help journey like together to a certain degree. Like when he saw the nutrition stuff that I was doing and how much it benefited me, he's kind of dove into that, and then we've played off each other. It's really nice to have somebody who you can learn these things with and talk about Marcus Aurelius and stoicism. And I'm grateful for him for showing me a lot of books. And yeah, so fasting protocol, nowadays I stray away from it just because it's not really too necessary for me, I would say. Like what my goals are at the moment, which currently I'm in a little bulking phase. I'm trying to put on a little weight and then cut down for summer. But so right now, not doing a ton of fasting. If I do fast, um, I think the proper way to do it would be, so obviously there's multiple ways you can go about it. I think the easiest way would just be doing like a 16 hours, um, 16 hours almost every day or every weekday. A lot of people will do. So that's like usually stop eating at 8 p.m. and then have your first meal at like 12 p.m., which is pretty easy. And that is something that I wouldn't recommend people to do, because it makes fasting, it doesn't make fasting the exception. And it almost, to a certain degree, will slow your metabolism, just because if you're doing it chronically, which is what I'm trying to allude to here, is like when you cut calories or don't eat a lot um, chronically, your metabolism is going to slow down in response to that, to become more efficient, because the body is the ultimate efficiency machine. So I really recommend making fasting the exception. Um, so like what I would recommend to people would be one 24-hour fast once a week. I think is a really cool idea for people, because then it gets them a pretty big calorie deficit, allows them a little bit more leeway during the week, but it also won't have any negative consequence on your immune system. I mean, on your metabolism, because it's the exception, it's not the rule. So I found that to be super helpful. My dad has lost, I think, close to 50 pounds by utilizing like keto and fasting. So I think if you're overweight, it's something that can really be beneficial for people.
Yeah, it's a whole wide world. I'm no expert in it, so I will save my opinions maybe for another podcast when I'm more well studied. I think a good person to go into this, Tim Ferriss has done like infinite studies on protocols. There's a lot of stuff online you can look up, because like ketogenesis specifically is a state of the body. So like
Yes,
monitoring your blood glucose, like actually knowing whether you're in keto versus just like I fasted for this period of time, so I should be in keto. Like your body, it's you either are or not, and it's not like a matter of timing. So that is interesting. But to talk about like what I do, because I have an interesting opinion. I'm surprised to hear that you wouldn't recommend like the intermittent fast, like the shortened eating window, because that's kind of what I do, and have done for a long time. And I think all of this stuff is like you have to try a lot of it for yourself and just figure out what works for you, because there's no like one size fits all answer. And also the best diet, the best training is the one that you can do consistently. Like that's just a
absolutely.
fact. um, so yeah, I mean, winding back the clock, I think growing up in sports, like I went to a tiny high school. I graduated with 90 people.
Whoa.
So, yeah, real small. So like my lacrosse team, like I played lacrosse through high school, and we didn't have a weight training program. The only like sports team that got weights was football. And so I didn't really train weight training consistently. The first time I even really had any training was I took a physical education credit my senior year of high school, just like as a filler class. And I got to do a little bit of weight training, but it was like the football coach ran it. So it was like basically just the football players workouts, so like power clean, squats, bench, whatever. And then get into college, I'm basically starting to teach myself, like looking at fitness influencers online. Like Christian Guzman was like one of the first ones I ever watched, of like Alpha Lead Athletics, Alpha Land, all that stuff. Shout out Christian if he ever sees this. But yeah, so he was like a big guy, and just learning stuff on YouTube, like self-taught kind of everything. And so it started with like staying with a lot of the same traditional stuff. I had that same coach send me just like an Excel file, like, okay, what were the workouts we're already doing? And I just kind of stuck with that, at least to have some sort of regimented plan early in college. And then once you get more familiar with your body and progressive overload and stuff, you can kind of start self-programming. But that was all like very traditional, like 8-week maxing period of like strength building, and then you 1 rep max for the basic movements, back squat, bench, and power clean, no deadlift. But a lot of that stuff, I think I've moved a lot away from barbell work, because I think it doesn't make sense to me to load an asymmetrical frame, aka my body, with a symmetrical load. Meaning, like, I'm a right-handed thrower, so I know that like my right shoulder, right arm is stronger, but maybe has like certain like mobility range stuff that's different than my left side. So like I'm not going to use a barbell to track a symmetrical path when I know that my body's not feeling it symmetrically. Same thing with squats. Like I had a previous like disc herniation in high school, so I know that there's certain tightnesses and like predispositions in my lower body that are different. So I'm big on like unilateral work, whether that's dumbbell bench press or like Bulgarian split squats as opposed to like a barbell squat. um, So a lot of that stuff is kind of in my training. I think similar to you, my lower body I'm trying to keep a lot more mobile and dynamic and athletic. I'm fortunate that my lower body is like hyper responsive to growth, so I don't actually have to load it crazy. Like I've just naturally have big legs, always have, and so I can still get bodybuilding kind of results like I with doing like ATG squats with Ben Patrick stuff. And so that also helped me through some injuries in college. So I'm big on like the mobility, the lower body stuff, movement freedom kind of stuff, and then upper body definitely training for a blend. I feel like at this point I've trained long enough that I'm pretty strong and I'm happy with like the relative strength that I have. Obviously always wanted to get a little bit a little bit stronger, but mainly focusing on muscle size, aesthetics. Because like I said, it all started. The story goes back to like being insecure about my body. So I think for a long time I was getting a lot stronger in college, like eating whatever I wanted. I was growing. I was getting stronger. I was being a better athlete, but I still like just wasn't looking great or wasn't happy at least with what I looked like. And it kind of just became a point of frustration. Like it doesn't matter how athletic you are. Like nobody cares what your squat max is if you look like an everybody. Like if you just like take your shirt off and you're just like base like very normal bodied,
Yep.
it takes a little bit of the satisfaction because like I was working hard as
Dude,
shit
no
7
doubt.
days a week, like, and nobody could tell. Like if you take your shirt off at the pool and you don't look like you work out 7 days a week, like what is it all for? So to some degree, there's like a huge vain aspect of that, which I will acknowledge. But
But
for
dude, it's a good thing.
I know 100%, it's a huge motivator, and I also think that generally speaking, because of like the way my genetics are and the way they express themselves, that like it is a good point for me, especially on the nutrition side. Like if I don't look good, like if I'm not naturally keeping myself lean, I know I'm not being as disciplined as I should, especially with the nutrition side. So if I can keep myself on the leaner side, which is like not my natural disposition genetically or whatever, epigenetically, then I know that I need to exercise a little bit more control there. And it was like the duality thing you talked about before, where like I'm happy that I wasn't maybe genetically blessed, because if I was just like shredded out the womb, like I wouldn't have learned this stuff, right? Like if you look good all the time, it's like you've probably met the athletes even in baseball, like the kid that just touches a baseball and can throw 150 miles per hour, like screw that guy. Like he didn't have to work for it, but he's probably like a lazy bum, but he can just rip the ball. Same thing with like other sports and weightlifting specifically. Some dudes can just pick up a weight and go bench 225 for the first time ever. But like for me, it's like I didn't get that. I didn't get any of those like things handed to me. So I've had to learn the protocol, a systematized, like really optimal training routine to be able to get closer to good results. So that's kind of like training. And then nutrition wise, like it's been a long, winding path of self experimentation. Anything from like early on, it was like just calories, like make sure you're getting hella calories, grow, like force it down, double meals, 2 plates, whatever. And then it's like you feel gross, you start to get puffy and like doughy, and it's like, all right, what are we doing? And so kind of winding that back and wanting to get like super shredded, which is like I think a mistake for anyone under really 24. Like you should just grow and like all that testosterone, all the stuff you get through puberty, like focus on gaining strength and size, and then allow yourself to like calorie restrict later in life. But yeah, trying to get like super shredded, so you go to like all these like low calorie diets, like the zero sugar stuff, the all that stuff that is just like loaded with chemicals, pesticides, and horrible stuff for your gut health and all that stuff. So did that phase for a little bit, like eating straight egg whites and like just no nutritional value at all, but like just hitting the numbers, like max protein, minimal calories.
Yep.
And then now I've come kind of full circle to where I think is like a much more like
Balance.
balanced approach, where you're not just like eating volume food to be full, but you're eating food that gives you satiety. So like high fat animal protein, fruit, more or less like animal based, minimizing processed stuff. Like I even stay away from like whey, not because of like the skin, because I think if you get good grass fed whey, it's fine. I just like as minimally processed as possible. And then also kind of with the satiety thing, like if I for the same calories could eat like a chicken breast, some shrimp, salmon, grass-fed patty, as opposed to like a protein shake, I'm gonna go with one of those options because it'll just make me more full and more like
100%.
satiated. So that's kind of where I'm at with all the nutrition stuff. But it's been a long like road of experimentation, trial and error. but it's kind of, I think everybody has to go through a little bit of it, you know, like pulling on those different levers. Like you said, like you started to realize like, interesting, I have a reaction on the nights I do drink, and then the nights I don't drink, I don't. Okay, that's one thing. Like it's like a variable, and without the quantitative stuff like that doctor you were talking about, like if you're not measuring, constantly doing blood panels, constantly doing sensitivity tests, you have to do a little bit of the push and pull experimentation. Like, okay, this week I'll cut out whey protein. Oh, well, I don't break out with acne anymore. That's interesting. And like, so for a lot of people, I think that's a good way to kind of like move directionally closer to what works for you and your body. And that's kind of what I've done. But there's a ton of like really, really good information out there. And then there's also a ton of really, really bad information out there.
Awful information out there,
Horrible,
like a
like
ton of it.
misleading. Everyone's trying to sell you something. I think a big like Occam's razor or kind of a heuristic you can use when you're trying to assess the validity of information online. It's not uniform, but if someone is trying to sell you something, like if it's a training program, if somebody's a fitness influencer and they're trying to sell you a training program, they look like super insane, they're probably using performance enhancing drugs. It's no knock on any of that stuff, but if they don't admit it, that's where the problem is, because they're just being deceptive to sell you their program. And then same thing with like any nutrition, like if they're trying to sell you a supplement, like the get like shredded fast pack, like fat loss, whatever, that stuff is a complete fucking scam. The more reductionist I think you can be with any of it, whether it's training, sleep, nutrition, like move closer to what we've done for thousands of years, and your body will react accordingly. We have this tight window of 100 or so years of like hyper intense science, and we're trying to like push and pull on all these levers, like have lab made foods, but we're not going to be able to unwrite the evolution that's happened over thousands of years. Like, what were those people continually eating? What was worth their time to go find? Like, do you think like for like a man, for me to get up to like 3,000 calories on a day, was it worth my time as a hunter gatherer to go pick at blueberries that were like 0.5 calories each? Or do I go kill an animal and eat the heart? Like, what makes more sense for from a nutrition's perspective? And so that's kind of like where I'm starting to learn and land more. Like what were like sought after by our ancestors, you know, Carnivore MD, Paul Saladino, great information guy. Obviously he has his own supplement company, so you have to take everything with a grain of salt. Like, you know, his supplements, are they better than other people's? It's not for me to say, but definitely the information he's putting out there, being like well studied on the subject. And clearly he also has the results as well. Like he's an older guy, very low body fat percentage, clearly has like good skin, a lot of sun exposure, all that stuff. So he's doing a lot of stuff right. And then you would contrast that with like your everyday doctor, like your physician care person at whatever hospital you're going to. Like they're probably pasty, overweight, and giving you the FDA recommended list of like, here's your daily values. Like, are you
Here's
eating
your
your
7
Cheerios?
servings of bread.
Yeah, like, do you get your Cheerios and OJ this morning? It's
Yeah.
like, all right, what, like, are we trying to live, or are you just trying to make me sick so you can sell me a pill?
Yep. Yeah, it's I love that perspective. I think that, you know, there's so many people saying so many different views when it comes to nutrition, especially, and it's such a hard field to navigate and to really understand what's going on. And taking a step back, looking at how humans were designed to eat, the things that they were doing, and taking it back to like that hunter-gatherer, I think that's such a valuable way to understand how humans should be eating. There's this guy, Dr. Bill Schindler. Are you familiar with him?
Mm-mm.
So he's a archaeologist or anthropologist, one of the two.
Okay.
I don't even know the difference, to be honest with you. Um, but what he studies is how humans were designed to eat. So all of his studies in archaeology are based upon how humans went about eating and the things that they ate, the things that they didn't eat. And you know, his conclusions are pretty awesome, are pretty interesting. And it's like, we wanted to do the least amount of work possible and get the most calories as possible. The complete opposite of how we go about things today. We want to eat the least amount of calories as possible and want to go to a gym and work those calories off. Like it's a whole different lens. So like he was saying that humans, like you said, we want this highly satiating, highly bioavailable animal protein. And then if we are going to have vegetables and fruit, whatever, most vegetables that we eat nowadays are from the mustard seed plant. It's a hybrid. Almost every vegetable we have now, it's a hybrid of the mustard seed.
I didn't know that.
Kale, spinach, broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, all of these are from the same, hybridized from the same plant. So he was saying that, like, in nature, like, it's pretty dangerous to just eat vegetables. Like, there is in the wild, there's not too many plant species that are actually edible. And humans would ferment and sprout and do these type of things to get the most nutrition possible out of these plants. But that was kind of like a secondary thing. And we really prioritized animal protein and fruits if they're available and easy. And yeah, he's so well spoken and so well versed on the evolution of how we went about things and what we did and didn't do and where milk came into consideration and all these things. So it's a really interesting listen. I recommend you check him out.
I definitely will. I'm trying to find more and more sources on this kind of stuff, like well educated, well researched. So I'll definitely have to check it out. But I think for the audience member and the every person, like, that maybe isn't as fascinated, but really just wants to figure out, like, what is the right answer? You know, like, I've done these yo-yo diets, I've done these crash diets. Everyone's trying to sell me a shake, like a pill, whatever. I think I've kind of touched on it, but two important things that you can use this lens across everything in life because it is a law, like
Yes.
the 80-20 principle and Occam's razor. Just take what is the most simple, what's going to give me most of the results from little input, one, and two, what is likely the simplest answer. So you can even look at, like, nature, plants, whatever. This guy says the phytotoxins. I don't know what's going on here. Okay, let's back it up. Simple answer. What are the colorful, exciting things that a plant is trying to tell you to eat? Fruit. They come in these vibrant colors. They're super sweet. Why are they sweet? Because the plant wants you to eat it. They want an animal to go be like, that was delicious. Let me do that again and again and again and again. But what is kale? It's rough. It's disgusting. It's bitter. That the plant is defending itself. It says, stop eating me. Stop eating me. So, like, that's like an Occam's razor, like plants life. And then the same way, like 80-20, like return on your calories and investment, animal meats, like the animal has done the hard work for you. It spent hours grazing. Like, for a cow to be alive, it has to eat all day. It just sits there chewing grass all day just to build the calories and stay alive. So it's doing the constant work, organizing and gathering the calories for you and putting it into its own body. And you can go grab all that nutrition. And like you touched on an important thing, bioavailability. How does your body receive it? Like, what is our stomach designed to do? Cows have 4 stomachs. It could process the plants, break it down in stages, versus us, we have 1. So we need a much simpler, much more gentle diet on our body. Otherwise, it's going to wreak havoc on our gut and all this stuff. But if you don't believe me, for those listening, because it's like very counter to what everyone's told, right? Like, yeah, FDA releases all this stuff. Like, you've been indoctrinated since a kid, like, eat your vegetables, like all these kinds of things. And so just try it. Like, if you think it's hearsay, if you think it's crazy, like, spend a week, spend 2, 3, like, the longer you can do it, the more you're going to see. But just see how your body reacts to it. You'll be impressed, because I was shocked and surprised. And I think it's like a massive key to vitality, as opposed to just getting by and like, oh, I've always had gas and cramps. Like, that's not how your body's screaming at you. Like, that's not how we should be. If you always have gas and bloat, or you're bloated after every meal, like, these are signs that something is wrong. It's not just how you're supposed to be. You can live a life like bloat free, cramp free, all this stuff, like clear skin, truly vital living.
I think we often confuse normal with common. Like, it isn't normal to be bloated after the meals that you eat, but it is common. And so people think that it is normal to be bloated after the meals that they eat because everyone else that they know gets the same reaction. So, yeah, a lot of the things that we consider as normal are just common. Like all those aches and pains that people get in their 40s and 50s, they think it's just getting older, but it's really just the inflammation from your diet that you've been eating for the past 30 years.
And the lack of movement and the
Lack
lack
of
of
movement. Yep.
consistent like training and stretching. And yeah, it's crazy. And it just opens this amazing world where you start to like pick apart like what you've been told versus what is true. I mean, even now, a big thing for me is trying to get more and more sun exposure. You're luckily in Miami, so you're close to the beach. You get great. I'm entering the winter here in Atlanta, so like I'm going to see a lot less of the sun, which is brutal. And but like I was raised like I was me and my brothers were the kids wearing swim shirts at the pool because like our parents made us wear them. We were like covered in sunscreen. We're like pale kids, but like your paleness is an expression of your environment. It's not like a predisposition. Like I found out, like I spent this past summer I was in an internship in San Diego, so I was in the sun all day whenever I could be. You know, like as soon as I left the office, shirt off, I'm at the beach, whatever. And I got like really tan, more tan than I've ever been in my entire life. And it's like, oh, it is just stimulus and response. And then we look at some like interesting data where skin cancer rates continue to rise, but humans are spending continually more time inside, not exposed to sunlight, but exposed to fluorescent light. So what light is actually giving us skin cancer? Like, and then when we go outside, we're covering our skin in these highly chemicalized sunscreens. Like, go read the ingredient list. It's not. It's pretty similar to a pesticide, like or like a dish detergent, as opposed to anything else. So I think like that's a big one that I'm trying to unlock for myself is more like positive sun exposure, because like vitamin D3, which like is a common vitamin that people supplement. Vitamin is like a mischaracterization. It's a hormone. Your body makes it. Your body makes it when it is exposed to sun. Excuse me. And your biggest organ, period, on your body is your skin. So allow every inch of your body to touch the sun, and like you'll produce that hormone, which has amazing cascading effects on performance, sleep, longevity, and stuff. Especially for men with like testosterone, but equally as important for women and all their hormone bounces as well.
Yeah, it's vitamin D too. Are you are you familiar with like the world of, I guess you would call it like Ray Peat style of nutrition, and are you familiar with him?
I definitely, dude, I know the name. I couldn't like describe it to you though. No, right now.
So they have a bunch of super interesting beliefs, and we'll save that for another podcast because that's a whole nother rabbit hole. But they talk about, so the fat soluble vitamins, so the vitamins that you get through fat. So it's D, vitamin D, vitamin K2, vitamin A, and there's vitamin E. So those are the four. And in the modern world, like we're almost all deficient in all four of those, if not one of those. And those are the biggest drivers of aromatase the inhibition of aromatase, which is the pathway that converts testosterone into estrogen.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're getting a lot of vitamin D and you're getting a lot of all these other vitamins, your body will be a lot more likely to not convert the testosterone into estrogen. Whereas if you're deficient, your body's going to convert testosterone into estrogen a lot more. So yeah, like, and we've just been taught that the sun is going to give us cancer, and I like to think that it's well-hearted, that it was that it wasn't like this big thing, big conspiracy,
The plot,
but
yeah.
it's weird. Then there's a lot of weird stuff going on, and they're starting to push this really weird agenda on us, it seems like, with people people talking about these low protein diets, and that we should be eating a lot of these GMO foods, and guys like Bill Gates own all the farmland in the United States, it seems like. And it's I like to think that it isn't this big whole red pill, blue pill type of conspiracy type thing, but when you just keep learning more and more about it, I hope that it's just ignorance, but
Yeah.
it really seems to be a little too far, to
Yeah.
just be ignorance. I don't know.
I it's an interesting it's funny that it funnels to this because it is starting to seem to me like if you stay in the self-development space, you start to unlock these kind of chips, nutrition, training, just but more like broadly like an agentic view of the world, like realizing you are in the driver's seat and you're like less of a sheep, less of like, oh, it's what they decided, like it's out of my control. You eventually, it all roads lead to like, what is the truth with a capital T here? Like, what's the story going on? So I will. I'm not going to turn this podcast into like showing off my tinfoil hat, but I definitely have my thoughts on it, and I'll send you some stuff after this that you can check out on kind of that realm. But I think we should pivot away potentially from that and also the nutrition thing because I think we also could go forever. I want to spend the last bit. I know we've been going for a while, and it'll be interesting to see if we clip this into like two-parter or whatever. But I want to go back to kind of you like give you the opportunity to share a little bit about what is your vision and kind of plan for moving forward with like what you're building with like the Alchemist library, because right now you're accruing all these knowledge, you're having amazing guests on, by the way, like especially for the size of the podcast you have right now. Like it's been very impressive and an inspiration to myself. Like I need to be reaching out more, but you've had all these like very intelligent people on, you're having awesome conversations with them. What is kind of the intermediate and then long-term vision with this? What are you trying to build? What is something you see coming of it all? And then yeah, kind of what are you excited about right now?
Yeah, so this is gonna sound very arrogant, and to a certain degree, I about at episode, I've had a few episodes, and it's happening more and more where I really will finish an episode and think I could do this at a very high level. Like I'm good at this, and I truly think that this is something I can do for a while and do it at a level where I genuinely have guests coming on the show, big guests coming on the show, and people, and a ton of people listening. And I think that right now it's weird because it's one of those things that it's not like I'm hoping. It's like I know. Like I have just this weird like from almost about episode 3, I've just kind of had this like knowing that this is something I'm going to do at a high level. And I it's very weird. It's hard to describe that feeling. And funny enough, like I don't really consider myself a big like goal person. I like to like I guess my goal in the podcast is stay consistent. Like I don't have these big granular visions. Um, I just know that if I stay consistent, keep doing what I'm doing, focus, don't half-ass it, good things are going to happen. And I apply that principle to a lot of things, just consistency, don't half-ass it, and good things will happen. And yeah, I'm not too big in goals. I think that for myself, um, I've just never really been a person that has been something that I focus on. Um, but yeah, I think that my intermediate goal is just to keep going, and my long term goal is just to keep going. And I really just want to. I don't want to get discouraged if things don't happen as fast as I want them to go. And I'm really just focusing on staying consistent. And like when I first started this thing, my only goal was to have conversations with intelligent, cool people that I would have never been able to talk to without the platform. So, and I've already accomplished that. I'm having this conversation with this cool motherfucker right now, Zach, dude. It's awesome. So uh I'm grateful for it, and I think that I'm just trying to be consistent, and I'm excited for the direction things are heading in, and I don't want to get too discouraged with the pace of things. So I'm just really trying to stay consistent and making that my only point to focus on.
I think that, I mean, your head's in the right place. And like we said at the beginning, we were talking about it, like there is no way to fail if you just don't stop, because everyone that did fail, that same person stopped because they thought the failure happened before they stopped. It was like, I haven't gotten what I wanted at this goal, so I'm just going to quit. Well, you didn't fail. You just stopped short of the goal. So yeah, no, whether it's 1 year, 2 years, 6 months, or fucking a decade, like if you just don't quit, like I think and know that you will be there. And likewise, I feel the same about myself. It's cool to hear you say the knowing, because I feel that same thing about myself and what I'm building. And like you said, it's hard to describe, but I know what you're talking about because I felt it. And it's like,
Yeah.
when you articulate it, like when you put it out there, even if it's to a person like myself that maybe understands, you sound like a crazy person. You're just like, I don't know how to tell you, but I know. And it's like, whether it's God, the universe, myself, arrogance, ego, like who knows where the message is coming from? Somebody whispering in your ear, like it's going to work, but like it's going to work. And that like the difference between like thinking like, oh, I hope it works, or maybe it'll work out, or I'll try this thing, versus like, no, like it, in a matter of time, and I can't tell you how long, it just will be what I'm doing. And it's just like that. Like if I just keep going, like day after day, week after week, keep recording, whatever, it's just gonna happen. So that's sick to hear about, and like, I don't know, I completely empathize with that.
I love it, dude. I love this stat about podcasting, and I keep going back to it because it's I feel like it encapsulates the things that I'm trying to build. And it's like 90% of podcasts don't make it past episode 3. And of that 90% that do, 90% of those don't make it past episode 20. So by making 21 podcast episodes, you are in the top percent of podcasters that have ever existed throughout history. Consistency beats intensity. And, it's just keep going, man. I'm excited for both of us.
Dude, that's a killer stat. I'm gonna have to add that to the mental Rolodex, because
I have to credit Chris Williamson for that one.
Yeah, no, dude, he's a huge inspiration.
I love Chris. He's one of my favorites.
Past 6 months have been like modern wisdom binging.
Oh, absolutely.
He's a legend. Austin looks like a place that I could potentially end up in the near-ish future, a cool place with a lot of sick people doing a lot of cool stuff. And he's out there obviously now. So I think there is a very realistic chance, and I plan to make it happen, that I get to cross paths with him. But legend in the space, and I'm not surprised that he gave the stat too, because he's a very data-driven guy.
Absolutely.
That's good. I mean, that's really fascinating to know. And it's like a great encouragement to myself right now, specifically because I'm coming up on that number. I don't know how many you're at. I'm sure you're surpassed that, I think. But yeah, I'm coming up on, gosh, I don't know, 17 or something. So I'm getting close, but like there's no plan in the near future to stop. So getting past that 20 is going to be sick.
And so what about you right now? When you look in the future, let's call it 5 years from now. What's your hope? Let's not even call it a hope. What's the vision?
Yeah, I mean, 5 years, a lot's going to change in 5. I think by that point I plan to be a multi-millionaire.
Fuck yeah.
So I don't think I'll be at double digits, but multiple million total lifetime earnings. Hard to know like what portfolio breakdown, but like that is a plan. It's like a written down goal. So it is going to happen. I also think, 5 years from now puts me at 28. I'll definitely be thinking about potentially, assuming I found like my partner that I want to like build a family with, like thinking about potentially starting a family with kids. I really, really want to be a dad. And so that is going to be part of the plan at around that time, I imagine, unless my wife is a lot younger and we have time to think about that.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. Those are maybe like the bigger ticket ones that I can say are probably true. The granularity of like where I'll be, what I'll be doing is probably not clear, other than the fact that I will be continuing to try to share a positive message and all the stuff that I know for me, I will continue to try to learn and become the best version of me. And now that I'm doing this stuff, I'm just going to share those teachings, learnings, lessons, books, recommendations with the world. Just like pump out as much content as feasible while still making money, whether I have to, like, if I quote unquote fail and have to take a normal job, I'm still going to try to push this stuff out there because I think it's a positive message that people need to hear. But I also know that if I've done that for 5 years, I won't have to be working that regular job. I'll be doing exactly what I want. And I think shorter term, like with the program I'm building in the next year, I want to have had 50 guys go through my course, have 50 Vitruvian Men alumni like that. I think it's like a big number I'm trying to hit. And I also know that once I've gotten to 50, based on like just the numbers in themselves, I will be like fully independent, financially speaking, from any other job. And I will be able to do that full time and continue to build the podcast and stuff like that. So that's kind of the intermediate goal. Some potentially huge changes happening soon, which I'm going to not share here because I don't want to like either jinx or what. I'll tell you offline, but depending on who's listening, it could be affected by whatever. So potentially huge pivots coming Q1 2023.
Let's go.
Yeah, like
Excited to hear about it.
I'll tell you as soon as we stop recording because I sent a message last night, and anyway, I'll share that afterwards. But big things coming, and could not be more excited for the future.
Great, brother. Any last words here? Anything you want to say before we wrap this up?
Any last words? I mean, first of all, thank you for those that have listened this far. I don't know what this is going to end up looking like. Split podcast, one jumbo podcast. One on yours, one on mine, whatever. So for those that are new to me, thank you for listening. If you find anything I say interesting or my thoughts, perspectives, opinions interesting, I do have my own podcast, the Vitruvian Man podcast. It's on Apple, Spotify, YouTube. You can find it there. I'm just sharing stories, my thoughts, perspectives, learnings. A lot very similar to Ryan here, although I think you're a little bit more of a podcast pro than myself. But I think we're both sharing the stories with the mics. That's the important part. Also, if you're a man looking to become the best version of yourself, I do run the Vitruvian Man program. It's a 12-week self-mastery course for men to become the best version of themselves alongside other men doing the same thing. It's what I kind of wish I had at the beginning of my journey. It's the amalgamation of all the lessons I've learned with a structured format to get you there over 12 weeks, nurturing your mind, your body, and your spirit. If that sounds interesting to you at all, you can message me on any platform. I'm at ZDSCHENKEN on Instagram, and now I'm on Twitter as well. Excited to be growing the Twitter presence. Really cool platform. So you can message me anywhere. I'm happy to hop on a call and just hear about your story and see if you'd be a good fit for the program. Your time is your most valuable resource. So thank you for spending it with me. It means a lot. Every person that listens to the end of this thing, it means everything. And so likewise to you, Ryan, thank you for spending your time with me today.
Appreciate you, brother. I'm glad we were able to make this work, and it's been a lot of fun to talk, and we're definitely going to have to do this again. I think there's a bunch we didn't get to and a ton of rabbit holes that we can dive into. So we'll do a bunch of these in the future. I think that'd be great.
Part 2 and more on the way.
Yes, sir. All right.
Cool.
And if he fails, at least fails while daring greater, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who know neither victory nor defeat.